Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. I am kind of ecstatic to have our next guest here with us today. It is my old pal from the Lollipop Guild, Kristin Tate. I've not talked to her forever. She was a partner with me on Red Eye and Kennedy. We used to do all the shows together. She's one of my absolute favorite people. For those who don't know, she has 3 books under her belt. How Do I Tax Thee, which is about hidden taxes in our everyday lives, which is very important because they're very regressive. If there's that hidden $5 tax on an airplane ticket, someone who's wealthy is not going to care, but the poor people are the ones who end up getting hurt the most. And there's no one really advocating for that. So her book covers all that. That's very interesting. Her first book was called Government Gone Wild. Her most recent book, which we're going to get into in a second, is called The Liberal Invasion of Red State America. And here's the story of Kristin Tate. Okay. There's this movie called She's All That. And basically Kristin Tate was the inspiration for this movie because there's this really, really nerdy, dorky girl. And then she grew up and became a dime. And people don't realize that she's still a nerdy, dorky girl, but she really is. And talking to Kristin about politics is some of the most number crunchy, wonky stuff. And it's just amazing to have you back on the show. How have you been?
I'm so excited to be here. Oh my gosh. I have missed talking to you and I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you for having me on. Although I wish we could be in person. This whole COVID world is really a bummer.
Well, let me tell you why I was so excited to talk to you, because I am moving to Austin for sure. 100%.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yep.
Oh
I just decided this week and I'll tell you exactly when. I was on the fence and 2 things happened. One is, for me, being a lifelong New Yorker, the dream always was to have a townhouse, right? Have a townhouse in New York, you've arrived. They have townhouses in Austin. I didn't think that was a thing. My friend just moved into one. So I'm like, okay, I could have my townhouse and really Pee-wee's Playhouse it out. But when you're in New York, as long as I am, you see certain trends that happen over years. Some things get worse, some things get better. Something that was very emblematic of 1970s New York, which was New York kind of at its worst. And you see in all those photos where the photos don't show you how smelly and violent and filthy it was and dangerous, was boomboxes everywhere. In fact, still, if you go on the subway in New York, there'll be signs that say no eating, no littering, and no boomboxes. We have reached a point now in New York, and this has happened the last 9 months, where it's perfectly acceptable to walk around the book bag with a speaker in it and just blast it wherever you go on the street. Everyone's scared to say anything, and the cops aren't going to do anything. And the moment where I'm like, that's it, I'm done. I was at my gym, which is not some kind of fancy Equinox gym. It's a regular, decent neighborhood gym. And there was a guy in the locker room blasting his music. And he called a member of the staff because he had forgotten the code to his locker. And the member of the staff came in, helped him get his stuff, and didn't say anything about the music. And I'm like, you know what? If I have to be a crotchety old man, I'm out of it. I hear. Because that is also, was it James Q. Wilson from the Manhattan Institute with the broken window policing? The whole idea of once you let certain things go, if people just leave those windows broken, other people realize, wait a minute, I can get away with whatever I want. And that's what leads to crime. I don't know how true that is, but for quality of life, it's not at all a concern with this administration, and it's only going to be getting worse. So I've had enough. All my friends are out of here. I'm out of here. I'm going to find a place. And when I was musing about this on Twitter, why this long setup, everyone kept telling me over and over, stop coming. You can come here. Just don't vote the way you voted back at home. Now, I don't believe in voting, but on a personal level, but your whole book was about this exact topic, internal migration, and how people are moving from blue states to red states, and how that's going to affect things on a national and statewide level. So I really want to give you the floor and talk about whether is this a real concern and what are the ramifications of it.
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to hear you're moving to Texas. Welcome to Texas, baby. This place is awesome. We have not been masking at all for like almost the whole year. I mean, a couple of the liberal pockets did the whole mask thing for a while. In fact, Austin was like the one place that had a mask mandate for quite a while. But you're going to be very happy down here. And when I hear that Michael Malice, the person who I perhaps most associate with New York, is moving to Texas, that tells me that these trends are, in full swing. Because I know you're a lifelong New Yorker.
I don't know how to drive. I'm going to have to learn how to drive.
Yeah, you're going to have to learn how to drive for sure. But I mean, so many people have made that same move that you're about to make. And it's really interesting because this whole idea of domestic migration has really burst into the mainstream media's narrative. And I was interested in this before this became, this large trend that's widely talked about. I started writing the book maybe 3 years ago. So it's been a long-term project for me. And the reason I became interested in domestic migration is actually because I grew up in New Hampshire, which was, when I grew up, a very libertarian, sort of actually right of center state. The people up there, they liked to be left alone. A lot of people were off the grid. Part of my childhood, I was practically off the grid. We didn't have TV or anything like that. No AC, very much do everything yourself. We grow our own vegetables. So I grew up there. That's sort of how my politics were formed, just by this do it yourself, pick yourself up by your bootstraps attitude that New Hampshire really embraced back when it was this sort of libertarian, leave us alone state. But as I grew up, the political environment up there really changed significantly, to the point where the whole bottom half of New Hampshire is now solidly blue. The top half, that's where you're going to find the real, New Hampshireites. But the bottom half of that state is now completely blue. It's been totally taken over by people who moved up there from Boston. And
it's like a sewage pipe like broke or something.
Oh, it's absolutely like a sewage pipe. And they've ruined the state. People still call it a purple state. It's not. I mean, I would be shocked if in a presidential race it ever went Republican, at least for the next few decades. So anyway, I saw this happening in my home state, and I got really interested in the idea of domestic migration. And then I moved to Texas, and I noticed similar things happening here, particularly with Californians moving to Texas. So I started doing a little research, and I realized this is having a profound impact on the country in a number of ways, politically, culturally, economically. So that's how I got interested in this trend. And I think that domestic migration will have a larger impact on our politics in the short term than immigration. And obviously, Republicans love talking about the border and immigration. And I certainly think that's an important topic as well. But they are totally missing the real threat to their electoral power, which is this domestic migration. So I'm sure, I don't know if you saw the most recent census numbers, but Texas picked up a couple of congressional seats. Florida did. New York, California, Illinois, they're all losing seats. And it's so obvious what's going on. These policies are failing. These blue state policies are utterly failing families and, single professionals. Everyone's being failed by them. Older retirees who are on fixed incomes, they're all out of these places because you have these exorbitant taxes that go up every single year on working people. You have out of control costs of living, which I covered in How Do I Tax Thee? And okay, you have these high costs of living, you have the high taxes. People who are wealthy will be willing to pay that for a good quality of life. But the quality of life is down the tubes now. I mean, when I lived in New York, I was living on the Upper East Side, a fairly safe area. And I was up in the 90s on like 92nd Street. There was a girl who was assaulted in broad daylight up one street away from where I used to live. I mean, this is commonplace now. People are getting attacked randomly on the streets in New York for no reason at all in formerly very safe neighborhoods. So people are leaving these blue states. They're leaving the big cities in the blue states. They're going to California, or they're going to Florida. They're going to Texas. They're even going to places like Oklahoma. places that don't seem as fun. They are gaining population as well. And what's really sad about this is that as these blue state policies are failing, the Biden administration is rolling out similar policies on a federal level, right? And if we do that, there's nowhere to flee, right? I mean, if we're all stuck with this nonsense, where are we going to flee to? So, yeah, I mean, I still think the red states are where the future's at, but I'm very concerned about red states because we're absorbing so many of you blue staters who come down here and vote in favor of the same Democratic policies you left. And it could make it a lot harder for Republicans to win in elections. But more importantly, it could result in just creating the same exact kinds of environments that these New Yorkers and Californians are fleeing. I mean, Austin is a great city. You're going to love it, but it's definitely moving in the wrong direction. I mean, there are like homeless tent encampments all over the place. And this is getting worse by the year, like in a noticeable way. You can tell every single year these kinds of problems get worse. And I'm telling you, it's because primarily the Californians who moved there and they just recreate the image of California. They're doing it to Florida too. The New Yorkers are doing it down there. So the question is obviously, what do we do about this, right? How do we fix the problem? And I mean, there's really no answer other than try to reach out to your new neighbors in these red states and explain to them why these red states have flourished. And, you know, I'm kind of a libertarian, so I don't think Republicans are always that great, but I think their policies are a hell of a lot less destructive than the Democrats, who have totally just abandoned their own people for political convenience. You know, New York is just the perfect example. It's so sad what's happening there. I mean, you see it firsthand every day. I don't need to tell you, but I was there last March or something, last March 2020, right before COVID hit. And even before COVID, I noticed that city is just not what it used to be. It's really, really sad because I still believe New York is the best city in the world. I still believe that. And I'd love to go back there someday, but the way the direction it's moving in right now, I'm not sure it's going to be able to recover, especially because industry is not tethered to New York anymore. So, right. You know, when New York kind of crawled out of its recession that it experienced in the early 80s, late 70s, it was the banking industry, fashion, you know, all the arts, the industries that were sort of tethered to New York and could not exist anywhere else. But now, I mean, you have JP Morgan, more than half their workforce isn't even in New York anymore. You have these big banks. I mean, Wall Street is a ghost town, but Wall Street is still operating. I mean, people are still making trades every day. They don't need to be on Wall Street. So because industry doesn't have to be in New York anymore, I think it'll be a lot harder for New York to bounce back if they ever vote in favor of another Giuliani. And I don't even think they will vote for another Giuliani. I think they're going to just keep doubling down on these policies. It'll get worse and worse. And ultimately, New York could become a big burned out city like Detroit. And that would be so sad. That would break my heart. But that looks like probably the future New York's heading for.
There's an expression in Judaism called sitting Shiva, which is when you have someone in your family who passes away, you know, it's an extended period of time where basically you cover the mirrors, you're not allowed to, it's just this whole process. And in extreme cases, you sit Shiva when you like disown your kids. Like if they do something really outrageous, you basically pretend they're dead and everyone comes to your house and offers you solace. And that's what I want to feel. That's what I'm basically doing for New York. Yeah. Like the level, I have been ride or die for this city for so long. I've defended it against everything. Like when people are like, it's dirty, it's filthy, it's that, I'm like, you don't get it. It's awesome. Yep. You know, it is championing everything. And I am now, what these people have done to my beloved city, I will never forgive them. I will never not be angry. I will never not be sad. The level of so many negative emotions, I cannot even begin to express myself. And frankly, at this point, I'd be more than happy to just burn it down and start all over again, because they've just taken this wonderful thing, this wonderful creation, this beautiful, you know, Lady Liberty lives here, sorry, New Jersey. And they're just basically like beating and raping her in front of me. And I can't stand it. It drives me so up the wall. I don't even know where to begin. And the thing is, there's absolutely no possibility that it's going to be getting better. Giuliani was only here after Dinkins, and he barely squeaked in through in 93. This was a precursor to the 1994 Republican Revolution, where they took Congress for the first time in 40 years. But I mean, Dinkins, it was really, really bad. When the murder rate was through the roof, he announced he was going to crack down on jaywalking. He was shutting down the libraries, and it was just such a perversion of what you would want a city to be governed by. And we're seeing it now in New York and Chicago and these other places. No one is more aggressive against the police than me. But the reason I am so aggressive against the police is because I'm against a government monopoly in terms of providing a service. And what happens when you have failed policing and when you politicize security, it's the people who I'm most worried about are the elderly poor, because they have been in these apartments in these cities for decades. They're the first ones who are going to get robbed. They're the first ones who are going to get sucker punched on the street. They have no recourse. And I'll put my lib hat on, like, they're the weakest, but they're the ones who are going to be the biggest victims. And no one's going to care because there's no narrative about what about these poor old people. You're seeing right now, there was a congresswoman, a state congresswoman, I believe, or some city councilwoman out of California. And we're seeing a huge spike in assaults against Asian Americans by African Americans. And she said, we need to talk about how white supremacy is the cause of all this or feeds into this. And it's like, I am not interested in having a conversation with you, because if you are just interested in, like, let's point fingers instead of, wait a minute, random wanton assaults, like back in the day in New York, the crime, I mean, to even try to put this in context is disgusting, but the crime had a purpose because people were robbing you for your money. You know, they would take your Walkman, they would take your money. They're beating people for no reason.
There was that story about an elderly lady that really stuck with me, who was walking down the street last year. I think it was over the summer, and just walking, minding her own business. I think it was the Upper East Side. And did you remember this? And this guy comes up behind her and just sucker punches her right in the head. She falls into a fire hydrant, and they finally caught the guy after weeks go by. And oh, lo and behold, this is someone who's been in prison a bunch of times, got released early. You know, this is what happens with these policies. Everyone's getting released from prison, and then, oh, shocker, they go and they commit more crimes. It's really very sad. And like you say, it's the people who can't afford to move. You know, you and I, we're mobile. We can afford to move if we have to. There are lots of people who live in New York who can't do that. Elderly people in particular who are on a fixed income and have been there forever. They can't just pick up and move to Austin. They're at the mercy of whatever these people do to New York. And, you know, the difference between the time period when Dinkins was in power was that at least New York had industry, right? Industry never left New York. The industry is leaving New York. The fact that you have NASDAQ now considering Dallas as, you know, their new headquarters, that right there, if they decide to move to Dallas, that would devastate New York. Just that one company. We see JP Morgan and these other banks moving out of the city. Once industry leaves, the jobs will leave, and the productive members of society will leave as well. They will go where the jobs are. And all you will have left are the poor and the criminals. Yeah. And that's when you're going to have a real problem. That's when it becomes the Wild West and complete anarchy on the streets.
Well, not the kind of anarchy I like.
Right.
But there's also another element of that, which is, you know, besides the industry and the banks and all the preppy people, New York has always been a magnet for creative people. Mm-hmm. You've had Broadway, you have the hipster neighborhoods, Williamsburg and Greenpoint, things like that. If I were a young entrepreneur and I wanted to create an ice cream shop or a restaurant or a boutique or any of these little quirky things that give New York or any city character, why would I start it in New York now when not only is the rent going to be through the roof, where the people have gone, and I have an entire business climate extremely hostile to making sure I can't get started, whereas starting any business is incredibly difficult. It's such an uphill battle. Wouldn't I rather be the coolest restaurant in Oklahoma City and get lots of internet buzz and be a big fish in a small pond, as opposed to being DOA in New York or selling my stuff on Etsy. Just the incentives do not line up. And I think this is something you talk a lot about in your work, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. There is a complete lack, and it's like they talk about systemic racism. There's a complete lack on the left, of the broader left, of understanding or even discussing the idea that people respond to incentives. They do not ever talk in these terms or think in these terms. And yet that is a great way to motivate people to do things. And more importantly, to drive people away.
That's exactly right. Especially when you're talking about business owners and small business owners. There's a reason why there's so much growth, corporate growth in Texas. And it's because these entrepreneurs are responding to incentives. Austin, I would argue the city of Austin is just as cool now as Brooklyn, maybe even getting cooler. You have these interesting little companies popping up. You have these incredible restaurants. The culture is just getting more interesting by the day. Museums, everything you could ever want in a city is now in Austin. I can tell you it was not like that a decade ago in Austin. And it's because the creative people are going there too. They're following the industry. And, I just think that, if these blue cities, these blue state cities want to come back and they want, to return to their former glory, they will need to incentivize business growth, which they are just not doing right now. Elon Musk, I'm sure you saw this. Elon Musk is relocating to Austin. Yeah. It's not just the small startups, it's the big guys too, which bring thousands and thousands of jobs with them. I'm in Houston. We have HP coming down here, Oracle. These are all companies with thousands of people. And a lot of those employees are young creatives, and they will contribute to the culture when they get here. And, what concerns me about it, part of this is very vindicating for me, obviously, because people are coming to the places that have fiscal conservatism and, a more red sort of way about them. But I'm worried about the future of these places, because part of what I did for my book is I looked at election results over a span of time and compared that with the domestic migration rates. And nearly every suburban county in the state of Texas has been trending blue, especially the ones that are getting the most people from these blue states. The same in Florida, with a few exceptions. Florida is kind of a weird political animal because you have a lot of retirees and Cubans who tend to vote right of center. So Florida is a little different, but Texas, Arizona, Colorado, a lot of these states that are particularly getting the Californians, you can look at every single county that's receiving the most domestic migrations, and every single one of them is trending to the left in local and state and national elections. It's very consistent. So that's what concerns me about it most. I'm not sure that people really think about politics when they move. They're thinking about the quality of life. They're thinking about culture, jobs, but they're not connecting the dots. Well, why is it that there's a great culture down in Austin? Why is it that there are great paying jobs? Why is it that you can afford a house without making millions of dollars a year? There's a reason for all of that. But people don't necessarily connect those dots. So they just mindlessly keep voting for the big government, lefties that they voted for back home. So part of this is just opening people's eyes up to what's happening. Otherwise, we're just going to have a situation where, Austin will just be the next San Francisco, and then we're going to have to find a new place to move. It'll just be like a never-ending cycle, I suppose. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, Biden is federalizing a lot of this toxic left-wing policy. He's obviously raising taxes on families now. He said it was only going to be on people who make over $400,000 a year. We now know it's $200,000 a year, because if you're married, it's by household, not indexed for inflation, by the way. So we all know inflation's about to set in. So that could essentially apply to middle-class earners soon. The capital gains tax, the corporate tax is now going up to 29%. So all of these blue state policies, what I'm worried about is they'll become inescapable, because Biden is going to federalize them. And at the same time, by the way, he is rewarding the blue states that are making these bad financial decisions by giving them massive subsidies. Like the COVID bill, for example, the last one that they just passed, it gave aid to almost every single state, but it said, if you're a state that cuts taxes, you don't get any of this aid. Basically just incentivizing these states to continue bloating their pensions and payrolls and spending, out of control. So it's pretty bleak out there, but I think that as more people keep moving to these red states, hopefully they will realize that the policies they left are what created the toxic situations that caused them to live miserable, horrible lives where they could not afford very much.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. Want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by Sheath Underwear. They make the most comfortable boxer briefs I have ever worn, and I'm currently wearing them right now. Is that TMI? Do they still say TMI? I don't know. I'm a boomer and a boomer. Leave that in. If you're sick of boxers that are too loose or briefs that are too tight, Sheath is for you. You don't chafe, you don't sweat. They're super comfortable and give you great support. And the amazing thing about Sheath underwear is their dual pouch technology that keeps your boy parts separated. First time you put it on, you're like, what is this? And then you can't live without it. Here's the other thing. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. And they've got new materials that I've tried. The mesh I've tried, which are really even lighter. And the bamboo, I'm very excited to try to put around my junk. I've always wanted to put my junk around bamboo and call myself a panda. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. And now let's get back to the beautiful and talented and intelligent Kristin Tate. Well, two things come to mind. I was talking to Ben Domenech, who runs the Federalist, who you probably know. And I was, while writing my upcoming book, I was reminding Ben of Reagan's speech in 1964, which launched his political career when he was endorsing Barry Goldwater, who was from Arizona, who was too radical for America. He had a huge landslide defeat, but basically launched the modern conservative movement. And Reagan gave this talk called A Time for Choosing. It was this big speech.
Most famous speech.
Yeah. And there was this one paragraph in it, which was really, really moving, especially for someone like me who was born in the Soviet Union. And he was talking about a buddy of his was talking to a friend of his who was Cuban. And he goes, isn't it great that you got out of Cuba and came to America? He goes, wait, you don't understand. I had some place to go to. If you guys ruin this country, you don't have an America to go. This is the last hope for freedom on earth. And I think what you're talking about with Florida politics and these other states, what we're seeing on the right is, in some ways, and I hate to praise this person, is Karl Rove's 2004 strategy, which is instead of reaching for the middle, let's rile up our base and get them animated and excited, and we'll win our election just by mainly
that's what Trump did.
And that's what, very much so.
Yeah.
And I think if you see, instead of trying to persuade, you've been in New York enough, there's no talking to these people. They will never, ever see. And let me also make clear to people listening, this isn't like they're voting and they're voting for gay marriage or that they're voting for like pro-choice initiatives. They're voting for the right for homeless people to literally set up tents on the sidewalk, big tents. I'm not a camping person. You're from New Hampshire. I'm from Brooklyn. But you will have in LA, I didn't realize this until recently, Skid Row is an expression. It's also literally a street in LA. Now a neighborhood.
More than a street.
Oh,
it's
now
disgusting.
Now it's an entire neighborhood where
they fence it in.
Yeah, you can't even walk because the entire go on Google Maps. If you don't believe me, Google Skid Row. It's the entire street is tent after tent after tent with homeless people, many of whom are mentally ill, many of whom have drug problems, many of them who don't have bathrooms. And the official government policy that the police are enforcing is you have to sit on your hands. We're not going to do anything about this. We will not prosecute them for anything. Or if we do prosecute them, it's going to be a revolving door. And that is what is happening in Austin. So when we talk about, just quickly, when we talk about voting for blue or Democratic policies, this isn't some minor, like culturally left thing where I want to see diversity on TV. This is extreme radicalism professionalism that I don't think people appreciate. And if you're of the mindset that this is appropriate, I don't think a conversation is going to be fruitful. I think it has to be, what steps do we need to take to make sure you can't do anything to implement your demented ideas?
Yep. Although I would push back on that and say, I totally agree with you in terms of people who are in New York and San Francisco. But if someone hates their lives enough in these blue cities to actually leave,
okay,
I do think you have some opportunity there to talk to those folks. The ones who are still in New York and California, forget about it. That's a waste of time. But if someone's life is miserable enough where they are willing to pack everything they own and pick up and uproot their family and move somewhere totally new where they've never been, totally different culture, I do think you can change the minds of those people. To your point on homelessness, this is definitely off topic for my book, but the homeless problem is out of control. I personally think they need to bring back insane asylums. And I mean that. I mean, there are several kinds of homeless people, right? You have to categorize them. There are the mentally ill who literally are mentally ill. They need to go into some sort of hospital. Then there are criminals. Those people need to be in jail. Okay. And then there are people who are honest people who have hit hard times. I would say that's a very small minority, like the people who would work if they could, but they just hit hard times. Those people, okay, we can talk about them. They probably have some sort of program that we can create where those people can get back into the workforce. But this idea that we're just going to let these three very distinct groups of people all get clumped together and live on the streets indefinitely, and we all just have to put up with that, and they can go around and assault people and commit crimes over and over and over again. It's mind-blowing to me that people will not only deal with this, but they will push for initiatives for it to keep happening. And part of the problem is that you have this class of people, particularly in California, who can afford to isolate themselves from these bad elements. They're not down on Skid Row. The people who are voting in favor of this nonsense, they never go to Skid Row. They probably could not even tell you, where Skid Row is. Of course, LA, most people never go downtown. They're all in the Palisades and whatever. But the people who say they support these initiatives, the people who put the Black Lives Matter signs in front of their townhouses, they never interact with the homeless folks. They never interact with diverse communities. They have no idea what the hell they're talking about. And these are the people who are forcing their virtues onto the most vulnerable, who are the poor working people who are just trying to get by and get their paychecks and go home, and now have to deal with trash on the ground, getting assaulted, being yelled at, and not feeling safe. It's just tragic. And I wish that we could take all these homeless people and just put them on the lawn in front of these people's houses who are voting in favor of this nonsense, because they are so out of touch. It reminds me, up in New Hampshire where my dad lives in not where I grew up. He's moved, and he now lives in a pretty well-to-do town of WASPs in New Hampshire in the Hanover area. And they all have these crazy, ridiculous signs in their yards. Like, in this house, we believe ... Black Lives Matter, and whatever. It's all these bumper stickers listed on these stupid lawn signs in front of their nice, big, beautiful Victorian houses. These people have never seen a Black person. The town is like 99.999% white, and the other whatever remaining percentage, it's like Indian or something. Like, they've never seen a Black person. They've never interacted with a homeless person. They have never, actually come face to face with these problems they claim they're so passionate about. And these people are the problem with our society. It's not, Black or white people, or, it's the upper middle class folks who live in these nice neighborhoods and never have to interact with the lowest elements of society that are burdening lower class working people.
I can't think of any coalition that is stronger than the amount of people in this country who correctly despise middle-aged white women. Because
You know, the women with like the dangly things coming off their glasses. Like when one of those ladies walks up to you, you know you're in trouble. Those ladies are the problem with our society today.
But they're horrible.
They're awful.
They are. I'll tell a tale out of school. I was having dinner on the Upper East Side, which I hate to go to, with a few like people who work in media, and I'm not a loud person, as anyone who knows me knows, as you know, it's pretty obvious. We were having a fun dinner. And this woman, she must have been 80. She was this typical Upper East Side T-word. And she comes over in her passive aggressive way, starts lecturing one of the people next to me. And she's like, oh, are we too loud? Like referring to herself sarcastically. And the guy was like, no. And she goes, oh, well, people should be like more considerate of those around them. So instead of like telling the waitress to tell us to keep it quiet, she decided to come over and have a confrontation. Well, she didn't realize she was talking to me. So then my friend goes, he goes, well, why are you like saying this? She goes, oh, so that you could learn how I feel. And I go, I have learned and I don't care. So now you can be free to leave. And she goes, well, she says something else. I go, listen, lady, you don't have that much time left. Why are you standing here talking to us when you should be getting the fuck out of here? And she goes, who knows who has more time left, you or me? And I go, the actuary. And everyone at the table was like, holy crap. And I'm like, not start fights you can't finish, you horrible old crone. But that's the point hilarious. Is that mentality is applied to politics because that broad will move to Florida or to Texas and will tell you, see, you're privileged. You don't know what it's like to, have a heroin addiction. It's important for these people to have shelter. And there's so many mental leaps there. That's like, I would agree with every step. That does not mean there should be tents covering downtown. That is a complete non sequitur. Here's another one. In the Upper West Side of Manhattan, it's the law that fancy hotels have to take in homeless people.
I know, like the Empire Hotel.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah. So these hotels, which are like $400 a night, are mandated to have homeless people inside them. And where people were complaining because the hotel was across the street from an elementary school, or maybe high school, let's pretend I'm getting completely wrong, steelman the argument. They were yelling at the parents for not being more understanding of the homeless people who were shrieking at their school children.
Yep. That was the Empire Hotel, which is across the street from an elementary school. It was
elementary. Okay.
Yeah, it was one of these, one of the hotels. I know there were several that got these contracts, but what's sick about it is the hotels actually love that setup because the city of New York and the state pay them more per night to house each of these homeless people than they get on the market. So the hotels want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to house all of these homeless people, but they don't want the public to know about it because they don't want the reputation of the hotel to be damaged. Like, do you really want to stay at the Empire Hotel knowing like the night before a homeless dude was in the bed? No, of course not. So what these hotels are doing is they were trying to fill up all their rooms with these homeless people during COVID because the government would pay them way more than they were getting, just from normal patrons. And they could fill them to capacity every night. So we taxpayers, or you taxpayers, because you're in New York, you were funding the bill for these crazy expensive hotels to be filled up with homeless people. And then the hotels would go to great lengths to make sure news media could not cover it and not actually list the names. They did not want the names of the hotels disclosed because they thought it would hurt their business.
And do you know what else they did? They also lobbied successfully to make it hard to do Airbnb, to the point where I think the rule is like you can't have an Airbnb unless you're living on the premises. So like if I had a New York City apartment building as an investment property and I'm renting it out, the hotel lobby made it so that you can't do that. So because that's competition for them. This is why I love talking to you, because as bad as it is, there's so many layers of malevolence when it comes to these kinds of situations.
And it's always it's always like the honest working taxpayers who get totally screwed. The very high earners, they don't care about all this. It's like, what do they care? They can afford the taxes and whatever. It's the lower and middle income earners who are just doing the right thing and paying their taxes who get totally taken for a ride. And I can tell you, I would just, I want nothing to do with New York anymore. I still love it. I mean, I love the idea of New York.
The idea.
But yeah. And there was a time when I wanted to move back there, but I want nothing to do with it anymore. Even just touching down in LaGuardia, it's like, I'm all of a sudden depressed when I get there. It's like, this place sucks. I remember reading a story back in the Dinkins days. The cops would be at LaGuardia and they'd hand these pamphlets to everyone getting off the planes that said "Welcome to Fear City," and it would list all of the things that people should do when they visit New York to stay safe, because the crime was out of control. And I would argue we're even in a worse place than that now. I mean,
hey guys, Michael Malice here. Want to talk to you about our newest sponsor, Fume, F-U-M. Their website is fumessential.com. I really like this sponsor because it's a natural, non-addictive replacement for smoking, vaping, and nicotine addictions. And smoking is the worst thing for your health that you might be doing. The problem with smoking is the ritual. What do you do with your hands if you're trying to quit smoking? Fume solves that. It's not a vape. It's not a cigarette. It's a hollow piece of Canadian maple wood with cores. They've got black pepper cores to help your nicotine cravings reduce, lavender for relaxation. You get it all. If you go to fumessential.com and use promo code Malice10, you get 10% off your entire order. You get monthly deliveries. You don't have to worry about your fume supply again. It looks really cool. And it helps you quit that horrible, horrible habit. Think of your teeth, extremely yellow teeth. Thanks to Fume, you don't have to worry about that. Go to fumessential.com and use promo code Malice10, and you get 10% off your order and put into crypto. Let's get back to the show. There's another element of this, which is like, I'm very, very fortunate because you've mentioned this when you've done my show previously, like how loyal and like smart my fan base is. I don't like telling them that because then they'll get ideas that I have respect for them or even appreciation. But one of the things they do, like they'll send me contributions or things like that, and I'll buy something cool, some cool book or collectible, then I'll do a live stream about it. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, some of the things that they've gotten, I can't put on like Instagram or YouTube because I feel like I'm dangling raw meat in front of someone who's going to come to this house and rob it. Because so if I go to Texas, at least I'll be able to have a camera system. I'll be able to have
a camera system. You're going to have a gun.
I was going to finish. Of course, I'm going to have several guns. I'm going to have, and an armory and things like that. Whereas here, I don't want to have to wonder if I leave this house for like 2 weeks to go to Russia or something like that. Is someone going to come? Am I going to come back? I got to tell you, though, in all fairness, as a bachelor, I had a friend visit me like a year ago, Jesse, and he's like, "Oh, are you moving? Because the house is such a mess." Like, you know, it's a bachelor pad that's a mess, but he's like, "Oh, did you just move?" It's like, no, this is how it always is. You have to step around. But I don't want to live that fear that I'm going to come home and there's going to be a broken window or something like that. So that's another, and that is, as night follows day, that is going to come next. I was reading a biography of Murray Rothbard, or a book by him, and he just casually mentions, like, he lived in the Upper West Side, that everyone he knew at one point, their home was broken into. Sometimes when people were inside, like you and I and many others don't think in those terms, like that's just something so terrifying, a home invasion.
Oh, yeah.
But that was the norm, and it wasn't that long ago. And they're doing everything in their power to drive the train towards that destination as fast as they can.
And you know what? When that becomes the reality, these woke idiots are going to be, totally on the side of the home invaders. Like, oh, imagine where they're coming from. They have
so
nothing.
Poor. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But real quick, you do have the most loyal fans. My brother's dating this gal named Amber. And a couple weeks ago, her whole family, I guess, went on a trip with my brother to the city of Austin, ironically enough. And he said they were all in the car talking about some podcasts that they love. Like, oh, this guy is so funny. Did you hear he said this or that? And then my brother hears them say Michael Malice, and they were talking about you. And my brother said, oh, I think my sister's been on that podcast. And they were like, oh no, there's no way she's been on that podcast. Like, we're talking about Michael Malice. She wouldn't, there's no way. And he said, no, I actually think she was. These people like lost their shit when they found out, not just that I've been on your podcast, but that like I personally know you. Like they are super fans. And I know they listen to your podcast. So hi, Amber and Amber's family. I know they're listening to this.
Do not address the audience directly. Not only that, you can tell them one of the things I'm going to frame when I move to Austin is Tom Shalhoub's cue card. I bring up the story every time you and I talk on air. Tom Shalhoub's cue card from the last episode of Red Eye. It was me, you, Lewis, and Anthony.
And it never aired.
It never aired, but I got everyone to sign that cue card. It's going to get framed and hung in the house, and your signature will be there. So absolutely.
You know why it never aired? Because Lewis said Asians have no soul.
Well, no, there's two things that happened. One is Trump bombed Syria. And you and I have done a lot of Fox. They put an earpiece. We don't even remember it because literally no one has ever spoken in our earpieces. It's more for the host. And Louis J. Gomez, who runs this network, repeatedly kept making a joke that because of that cab drivers, that Asians don't have souls. Then Anthony chimed in. Then I chimed in because when you have a bunch of humorists, you're going to do yes and you hear the voice in your ear. Can you please stop saying that Asians don't have souls? So blame Lewis, but it never aired. It was a really fun time, but it's also amazing how many, like, if we're going to get inside baseball, how many powerhouses came out of that scene. You had Tim Dillon, you have Andrew Schultz, who moved to Miami. I'm going to go fly down there again to do his show. There's so many names I'm sure I'm blanking on, but like so many people cut their teeth. Oh my God, I just noticed that cute dog behind you.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, what a scruffy little dog. What kind of dog? Is it a boy or a girl?
It's a boy. His name's Starbuck.
Oh my God, he's so cute. How old is he?
I've had him for a long time. He's 8.
Oh, leave me alone. I just want to sleep.
He's very demoralized right now. He has a bark collar on.
Why? What's happened?
He has a loud mouth. He goes out.
Does it work?
Neighbors. Yeah, it works.
Well, he went back to sleep. Oh my God. I was just at Kennedy's house yesterday playing with her French bulldog. He was very cute.
Yeah, he's really cute.
That's the other thing. If I go to Austin, I can get 2 dogs.
Yeah, that's right. And if you go to Austin, you will be eating barbecue all the time. You'll have a great life. You can walk your dog all around. You can actually get a townhouse. I mean,
it's going to be 2 dogs. It's going to be a German Shepherd named Rex and a pug named Buddy. And Buddy's always going to get Rex into trouble, even though Rex knows better, because you know better than to follow along this little clown. What have I told you, Rex?
But it sounds like a cartoon on like Cartoon Network or something.
They're going to have matching bandanas all the time.
Oh,
it's going to be really great. And I think sometimes one of them is going to get annoyed with the other. Although I don't think pugs are that rambunctious in terms of like being yappy and annoying. They're more like sedate.
Yeah, they're chill. They're chill dogs.
That's my. I might also get a Valhund, which is a Swedish version of the corgi. You probably haven't heard of it, but they're very yappy. So that's an issue. But now I know what to do. I'll get the little collar, just like.
Oh yeah, these things work like a charm.
Would they just shock them or something?
Yeah, I mean. It's not really a shock. It's like a strong, unpleasant vibration, apparently.
Okay. Like the dog whisperer.
Yes, exactly. But like once the dog knows the deal, like you just put it on and they won't bark. So they don't get shocked because they know it's on them. So they shut up immediately.
Well, after a while, dogs being not as smart as us, you could just have a regular collar and they'll think it's the shock collar.
That's a good idea. Although if they bark once and it doesn't shock them, then they'll know what's up.
Wait, so you're this is what a provincial New Yorker I am, okay? Because I think New Yorkers are so used to walking everywhere, we are completely oblivious to how gigantic this country is.
Texas is like its own country.
I was gonna say, how far is Houston from Austin?
It's actually not that far. It's like 3 hours in the car.
How hard do you think it's going to be for me to learn how to drive?
Have you actually never, ever been behind the wheel?
5 times.
It's not that hard. Okay. It's really, but Texas drivers are assholes. They're very aggressive.
But I own assholism.com.
Oh, okay. You'll be fine then.
Yeah. So, I mean, how long do you think it'll take me?
A week.
Okay. That's what I was, because it's not that it's just being more aware of your surroundings and getting over the fear, I think.
Exactly. So yeah, I think you'll be fine. I think I think you'll like it. And are you gonna get a townhouse, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna get one room for an aquarium. I also have a bunch of art, and I know how I'm gonna paint the walls to match the stuff, because I have some comic book art, right? So comic book art is black and white, then it's later colorized. So I'm gonna have the wall of the room match the color of the art as it was printed, even though the art itself is black and white. So it's gonna be really cerebral.
Wow. I am like so excited about this. We can actually hang out now.
Yeah, it'll be so much. And
I know.
I love the idea of road tripping. Me and my boys just went to Miami, which was not, Miami is it's like World Star. Did you see
I'm
it?
sure.
I didn't know that. I thought
I went to Miami. I mean, I haven't been there since COVID, but like, yeah, you can like get some diseases just by like being on the street there. Like,
people were fighting. It felt very on edge, which I was not expecting.
Oh, interesting. When I went there, it was just like a lot of smelly people partying in very close proximity.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm being told South Beach is not representative, but like the rest of it didn't seem that appealing to me either.
World Star. Yeah, no, it's Miami's a crazy scene. Didn't they just, I think in Miami though, they just had all of these crazy riots going on. Remember that a couple weeks ago?
The day I left,
where they were like all twerking on the cop cars and stuff.
The day I left Miami, there was a fist fight with like 5 people in the airport. Like 2 gates.
Saw that?
No, but it was the same day.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's like 2 gates down from me.
Right.
And that just happened today.
Urban Decay.
And it just happened again today.
Oh my God.
How are people getting in fist fights at the airport?
And
not taking out the TSA? But that's between you and me.
This whole society is going down the tubes rapidly. Like even since the last time I came on your show, I feel that American society is becoming a heap of garbage. And part of the reason why is because politics is infused in everything now. Everything.
I think we're going to have a national divorce. I've been arguing for this for 4 years.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah.
But you know what? The leftists don't want a national divorce because they need our money. They need to keep taxing us to fund all their bullshit because none of the people who, vote for them work.
Yeah, I'm not saying no divorce is easy. It's not going to be like Bill and Melinda Gates. But at a certain point, it's like, what are you going to do about it? And I think I just was on Buck Sexton's show and he laughed, but I'm like, and this is not to disrespect Buck. I mean, he was just, I think, kind of surprised by what I said. I'm like, look, if we have it that everyone is discussing defunding the police and having an issue on this, why aren't the Republicans putting forth a bill to expel California from the union?
Because they're cowards.
No, but my point is, that would be, even if it doesn't go anywhere, let's have everyone clutching their pearls and freaking out on the Democratic side instead of people in Oklahoma having to discuss defunding the police. I'm for abolishing the police.
With the right. They just let the left incrementally change society. It happens in increments, right? I mean, a year ago, the idea of defunding the police would have sounded insane. And now here we all are having serious discussions about this because we have let them move the goalpost incrementally. And, every day they move it a little bit, and we don't notice. And then before you know it, the goalpost is all the way over there. And we're all talking about defunding the police. It's ridiculous. And everyone's too scared to fight back. I mean, I shouldn't talk about it. I shouldn't be talking because even I don't really engage in some of these culture wars either, because people online, they dox you, they try to ruin your life. I mean, it's really scary what this mob, Twitter is like a mob in search of a victim. And anyone who says anything that doesn't fully agree with their agenda, they come after. You are one of the few people who is willing to just say it like it is. I mean, I'm serious. That's why everyone loves your Twitter feed so much. But like, these people are changing our society for the worse. And the last year it's happened rapidly. They seized on COVID. They seized on George Floyd. They are disingenuous. They are not having arguments in good faith. And I don't know where this will all end, but I can tell you it's not going to end well.
I think it is going to end well. I
You
think
do?
my next book after the Anarchist Handbook, The White Pill, is going to be about how the good guys won and how they're going to win again.
So in like 2 sentences.
I'm not spoiling my book.
Okay. All right.
Maybe off camera.
I think China is going to conquer us, or we're going to just become a failed Latin state like Brazil.
No, China doesn't. Okay, this is a whole long separate conversation. I'm not saying China's not a concern. Obviously, I did a book on North Korea. My level of animosity towards the Chinese government is without question and without limit. But I do not think I'm more like they can conquer us via the New York Times, but I don't think the New York Times is unstoppable. Is my point. What are you working on now? Are you working on a 4th book?
No. So I actually just joined a big statewide political race in Texas in an executive role. It might be announced by the time this episode comes out, but it's going to make national news when it's announced, and it's very exciting. So I've been really busy with that, and that's kind of what I've got going on right now. So can't talk about it too much right now, but it's very exciting. I think Texas is worth saving, and there are a lot of issues where we can lead the nation down here, whether it's taxes or, even defending just like our borders, being a state that exerts its influence and fights back against the federal government. There's just so much room for leadership down here. So I'm on a big statewide race down here. It'll be announced soon, and it's been taking up all my time. So no books in the works right now. But
and let's look at how that happened. If you look at Obamacare, that was because of Massachusetts and what Mitt Romney did there. But you also look at drug decriminalization that started out of Colorado, which was just basically blatant, and still is blatant defiance of federal law, being like, we're going to legalize it, come and raid us. And they did. They did raid Colorado. They did raid California. At a certain point, they're like, all right, we're going to have the will for this. So there is an enormous capacity, especially with a state with just, I'm sounding like a Texan already. Just shoot me now.
Yeah, you're going to fit in right in down here.
And everything's big in Texas except for us, Tate. But the one of the things I do like about Texans is this enormous sense, maybe it's phony, I don't know, I can't speak on that yet, of defiance.
Oh, it is not phony. That is 100% right. And it's awesome. It's such a badass place. Like, you come down here, at least for me, I came down here and I feel like I'm just in a totally different country, There
is a huge crew of us in Austin who are just waiting to be friends with you. So you will have, I'm serious though, but I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm moving is because I've said this before and I'll say it to you because I know it'll mean something to you. Moving is, especially after living in somewhere for your whole life, it's an emotional thing. It's also a complicated thing. And my friends down there are such badasses that they preemptively told me, like, they're going to make sure that there's no reason I can't do it. So one of them is like, I've got a lot of books, right? One of them said, I will come to your house and pack all your books myself. And he means it. I know he means it. Another one, and this actually seems like something I would do for fun, is like, I'll go look around in houses for you and I'll give you an honest report what I'd like, wouldn't like. I'm like, that just sounds like fun. If you go shopping without having to spend the thing and having a realtor. So there's no excuses left. And frankly, at this point, I don't need excuses. At this point, it's just a waiting game. It's done. I am so I feel, the Sex Pistols, who are a band I'm a huge fan of and who are a big influence on me, they ended their North American tour in San Francisco, I think it was. And they did a few songs, just cut the set, and Johnny Rotten says, you ever get the feeling you've been cheated? And just walked off the stage. And that's how I feel about New York. I just feel, I feel at this point they're screwing with us on purpose and are making things worse just because they can. Like, I know that's like crackpot, like tinfoil hat thinking, but it's indistinguishable.
No, they're open about it. They have a seething hatred for working people.
You're right.
They have a seething hatred for private industry. and a seething hatred for anyone or anything that questions government.
Yeah.
So they're open about it. I don't think that's conspiracy theory talk at all. I really don't. And, it's really interesting. We've seen like a total swap in terms of like the paradigms of these parties. Like, I think back, at least when I was a kid, it was the leftists who would always question things and be more skeptical and sort of be more free thinkers. And they were more likely to kind of have those inclinations. And now those are the biggest sheep. It's the leftists. They just, whatever the government tells them, they love getting pat on the head and, given a cookie and just taking whatever the government tells them as fact. And it's dangerous. I mean, that is, these people call themselves anti-fascists. They're the biggest fascists among us. It's really scary. And these ideas, I call it the unopposable ideas, like these ideas of like diversity, inclusiveness. They've created these ideas that you cannot oppose, right? Because who would be against diversity? Who would be against being inclusive?
Who would be against helping the homeless?
Exactly.
I'm not against it.
Exactly. They've created unopposable ideas, and that's what's caused these ideas to spread like wildfire. Why these corporations are like Delta and, these corporations that have nothing to do with politics are now big political organizations, essentially. And it's what's rotting the country. It's so powerful what they've created with language and ideas. And it's the right wingers now who are the ones who are willing to question and willing to, not just take the line from the government all the time without any pushback at all. So I love that rebel spirit, that streak that you find more on the right and within libertarians. And I find that to be much more prevalent down here in Texas, especially than where you are up in New York. So, if there's one place where freedom can survive, it's definitely Texas.
Do you have a big crew in Houston?
Yeah, I do. Houston's pretty awesome. So Houston, like I said, it's an aesthetically kind of ugly city. Like you get here and it's a lot of like strip malls. Austin's way cooler in terms of just, it's a prettier city. But Houston is kind of an armpit, but it's also very, I don't know how it's very, I don't want to use the word diverse because that's a left-wing word, but there are so many different kinds of people here. There's so much industry here. There's capital here. You meet people from everywhere. The food is just unbelievable. The museums, it's just such a cultured metropolitan city. And it really caught me off guard when I first moved here, but it's fantastic. I love the people. Dallas is great too. I mean, I'm sure you'll spend time up there when you come to Texas, but like each city in Texas kind of has its own personality. Like Austin is like the annoying, like liberal sibling. Houston's kind of like the oldest sibling who has like an established career going. Dallas is like the preppy, snobby sibling. Like it's kind of like siblings in a family. But they're all cool. They all have their own personalities and you'll love it. It's really awesome. But I will say the thing I was the most disappointed about when I moved down here is there are no cowboy hats and nobody, I thought I'd get down here and it was going to be like, everyone would be wearing cowboy hats and boots with the accent. But apparently that's a West Texas thing. So
well, you're not going to find Brooklyn accents anymore either. So, I mean,
they're becoming more common down here.
Yeah. Tate, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I think imagining you driving a car. Like, I'm trying to think. I think you should get like one of those monster pickup trucks, like an F-350. The next time I see you, I want to see you pull up in an F-350 with like, all the fixins. Like no,
I'm going to get a truck that turns into a dinosaur that eats other trucks.
Oh yeah. That would be like, very on brand.
Truckosaurus. No, actually I was talking to my friends and they were screaming at me, literally screaming in Miami about what kind of car to get. And they were insisting I should get a Toyota Camry. And I'm like, I don't like that because my dad had that. And I thought, won't people disrespect me? And then I asked my other car friends, they go, no one's going to judge you. It's not like with clothes. Like Toyota Camry is perfectly respectable. But what we settled on was me getting some kind of coupe, which are kind of these, like it's the 4-door, but there's only 4 seats, but only 2 doors. So they look a little cooler than a regular car, but they're still reliable and so on and so forth. Is that approved?
I guess. I know nothing about cars.
Oh.
So as long as it has 4 wheels and moves, I'm good with it. I hate cars. I think they're a big waste of money. So I always get the cheapest thing that's like reliable. So, but I'm very bad. Don't come to me for car advice. You'll be driving a lemon.
You are welcome. Hey guys, before we go, if you enjoyed this podcast, you might enjoy some of the other podcasts available at gasdigitalnetwork.com. This week, we're highlighting The Jasta Show with host, lead singer from the band Hatebreed, Jamie Jasta. You can find the full catalog of episodes on demand at gasdigitalnetwork.com or catch the latest 15 episodes anywhere you find podcasts. Here's a clip.
I had a great time hanging out with Jimmy Bauer once when I met him, and we got fucking handcuffed and sat on a curb outside of a bar together. That was great.
Why?
He was like talking to some girl. He came to an Eaton show. I've never met him, by the way. He's like in the back room, just like being Jimmy Bauer-ish. He's like, let's go to a bar. Meanie, let's fuck go to a bar. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna miss the opportunity to go to a bar, Jimmy Bauer. So we walk to this bar like near the venue. He gets fucking hammered, starts hitting on a girl. The girl's boyfriend like kind of steps in. Jimmy Bauer says something to her, like super offensive. She slaps him, his fake teeth come out, and she fucking steps on him. So he like goes fucking full like raging mad and starts just like pushing the boyfriend and like just screaming. And so they called the cops, and me and Jimmy Bauer got handcuffed and sat outside, and then they just let us go. But I never saw him again either.
Oh my God. That's incredible.